Jerusalem is not a big city, and there is not enough open space to build new cemeteries.
All across here on the Mount of Olives, you will see literally thousands and thousands and thousands of these tombstones.
For more than 3,000 years, the Mount of Olives has watched over Jerusalem in solemn silence, its white stone tombs stretching across the slopes, like an ancient army awaiting its commander. But today, something remarkable is stirring on this sacred mountain. Graves are shifting, tombs long sealed are cracking open, and the great cemetery itself is pressing closer toward the sealed eastern gate, the very gate through which prophecy declares the Messiah will one day enter. Are these changes simple geology, or signs that something far greater is unfolding? Stay with us as we investigate these living stones, these silent witnesses of prophecy. And before we begin, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to support our channel. Rising quietly to the east of Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives has stood for thousands of years as more than a landscape feature. It is a witness, an ancient sentinel carved by time, history, and the hand of God Himself. When you stand on its slopes and look toward the Temple Mount, you feel something unusual in the air, something that countless generations sensed long before us. This mountain has always been a place where heaven and earth seem to touch. In the days of the Old Testament, the Mount of Olives served as the backdrop for moments of great sorrow and divine revelation. It was over these very stones that King David fled, weeping during Absalom's rebellion, a king crushed by betrayal, yet still clinging to God. It was here that the prophet Ezekiel saw the glory of the Lord depart from the temple, resting upon this mountain before lifting away. Ezekiel 11:23 marked the moment when holiness withdrew, leaving a nation trembling under judgment. But the most stunning prophecy tied to this mountain comes from Zechariah 14:4. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two. This is not poetic imagery. It is a precise geographical statement linking this mountain to the final arrival of the Messiah. The ground beneath these graves, these stones, these ancient olive trees will one day quake beneath his returning footsteps. In the New Testament, the significance deepens. Jesus Himself walked these paths, taught His disciples about the last days from this elevation, and wept over Jerusalem as He foresaw its destruction. And from this very place, before the eyes of His disciples, He ascended into heaven. Acts 1:9-12 tells us that two angels declared He would return in the same way and to the same location. For this reason, the Mount of Olives is not a mythic mountain, nor a symbolic metaphor. It is a literal prophetic anchor in the heart of Israel, a mountain awaiting fulfillment. Pilgrims, prophets, scholars, and believers across centuries have been drawn to it, sensing that history itself is leaning toward this ridge of stone. And today, as unusual signs stir along its slopes, the world is once again turning its eyes toward this ancient mountain of prophecy. Across the Mount of Olives, countless tombs lie scattered like fragments of a forgotten manuscript. 150,000 stories carved into stone, each one whispering secrets older than empires. This is not just a cemetery. It is a puzzle, a riddle etched into the side of a mountain that prophecy refuses to let the world ignore. When you first look at it from a distance, the cemetery appears orderly, almost peaceful. But the closer you walk among these graves, the more the questions begin to rise. Why here? Why this mountain? And why have generations insisted on being buried at this specific angle, always facing the same sealed gate across the valley? Every tomb, whether cracked with age or still fresh in its white brilliance, is aligned toward a future event that has not yet happened. The precision is eerie. The unity, is unsettling. It is as though an entire nation chose to lie down and wait in formation. Some of the graves belong to prophets, rabbis, warriors, poets. Others belong to ordinary families whose names time has nearly erased. Yet, all of them seem to share a common expectation, as if they understood something about this mountain that modern scholars are only now beginning to rediscover. Hidden beneath the surface of the cemetery lies a network of ancient tunnels, burial chambers, and forgotten passages. Archaeologists debate their origins. Historians disagree on their purpose. Some say they were escape routes. Others say they were early resurrection monuments. And still others whisper a bolder possibility that these subterranean passages were intentionally carved to mirror the prophetic pathway of the Messiah himself. Even the soil raises questions. For centuries, pilgrims carried handfuls of this earth back to their homelands, believing it carried a supernatural connection to resurrection. Why this ground? Why this mountain? Why this convergence of belief, fear, and expectation? And now, in our generation, the mystery deepens. As the cemetery expands, graves are appearing in places once thought too unstable for burial. Newly placed tombs are edging closer to the ancient walls of Jerusalem, almost as if drawn toward the eastern gate like iron to a magnet. Some researchers highlight the geological danger. Others note a pattern, an unexplainable drift, as though history is physically rearranging itself toward prophecy. And then there is the strangest detail of all. No matter how many centuries pass, the graves never turn away. They always face the gate of the king. Always. What does all this mean? Why does this mountain hold so many layered mysteries? Stay with us, because the next part may reveal clues that are even more unsettling and far more prophetic. Across the Kidron Valley, directly facing the Mount of Olives, stands one of the most enigmatic structures in all Jerusalem, the Eastern Gate, also called the Golden Gate. At first glance, its massive limestone blocks appear lifeless, sealed, and immovable. But behind this wall of silence lies a mystery that has unsettled empires, challenged scholars, and stirred believers for centuries. It is a gate that God himself, according to prophecy, has marked for a moment yet to come. Unlike the other entrances to the Old City, the Eastern Gate is completely shut, its arches filled with heavy stone centuries ago. No footsteps have passed through it since medieval times. No ceremonies, no royal processions, no pilgrim crowds, just an unbroken seal facing the mountain where prophecy says the Messiah's feet will stand. Ezekiel 44:1-2 records that the gate is to remain closed because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. In other words, its silence is not accidental, it is intentional. The gate's history deepens the mystery. Islamic rulers, aware of Jewish expectations of a coming Messiah, sealed the gate in the 1500s and established a cemetery directly in front of it, believing that a priestly deliverer would not cross ground defiled by the dead. Their actions reveal something unusual. Even those who did not follow the scriptures feared the possibility that prophecy might be true. They tried to build a barrier against destiny, and yet the sealed gate continues to provoke a haunting question. Can human hands truly stop what God has ordained? Architects who study the structure are baffled by its endurance. Wars have shaken Jerusalem, earthquakes have fractured nearby foundations, and empires have risen and fallen, yet the Eastern Gate remains sealed, intact, untouched. Its undisturbed stillness feels almost unnatural, as if protected by something beyond stone and mortar. From the Mount of Olives, the alignment is perfect. The graves form a vast assembly on the slope, all facing the sealed gate. The gate stares back, unmoved, waiting. The symmetry is unmistakable. Two ancient witnesses positioned exactly as Scripture described. One where the Messiah departs, the other where he returns. And today, as the cemetery expands steadily toward this silent barrier, scholars around the world are taking notice. The gap between prophecy and physical reality is narrowing. The gate remains closed, but it speaks its silence heavy with expectation. It is a reminder carved in stone, standing patiently in the heart of Jerusalem, waiting for the moment when history, prophecy, and the will of God converge. In recent years, an unusual pattern has begun to emerge on the slopes of the Mount of Olives, one that archaeologists acknowledge with caution. Locals speak of in hushed curiosity, and Bible scholars view with growing anticipation. The ancient cemetery is not simply being expanded. It appears to be moving. Graves once separated from the old city by distance and elevation are now creeping steadily toward the walls of Jerusalem, inching closer to the sealed eastern gate with each passing decade. What makes this movement so mysterious is not merely the addition of new tombs, but the subtle shift of the entire burial landscape. Sections long considered too unstable for construction are being filled. Terraces once thought unsuitable for stone are now lined with fresh markers, and the visual effect is striking. From the mid-slope, the cemetery seems to flow downward like a white river of prophecy, pushing toward the gate reserved for the Messiah. Local caretakers describe the phenomenon with surprise. New families request burial plots lower on the slope, even when safer. Higher ground is available. Builders follow these requests, reinforcing ground that was previously ignored. It is as though an unseen hand is guiding generations toward a single focal point. Scholars debate whether this is purely cultural, symbolic, or something deeper, a subconscious pull toward prophecy itself. But the mystery intensifies beneath the surface. Geological surveys reveal minor shifts in the mountain's limestone layers, subtle pressure lines suggesting slow, natural movement. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to raise eyebrows. Scientists attribute it to erosion and seismic pressure. Yet students of Scripture note something else. Zechariah 14 prophesies that the Mount of Olives will one day split in two. These gentle adjustments, they argue, could be early tremors in a mountain chosen for divine intervention. And then there is the symmetrical alignment. The graves moving downward, the sealed gate waiting above, the ancient valley positioned between them like a prophetic stage. Even skeptics admit that no other city, no other mountain, no other cemetery in the world holds such layered meaning. For now, the movement is quiet, almost imperceptible. But when viewed across decades, the pattern becomes undeniable. The cemetery is stretching, aligning, reaching, as though preparing for a moment long foretold. A gathering of generations, old and new, forming a silent procession toward the threshold of prophecy. If this investigation has stirred your curiosity, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more prophetic insights and archaeological revelations. For centuries, the Mount of Olives Cemetery has rested in solemn stillness, its tombs sealed beneath the weight of time and tradition. But recently, a series of unusual disturbances has unsettled this quiet landscape. Cracked stones, shifted slabs, chambers that appear to have opened without human hands. These are not rumors. They are documented changes observed by locals, historians, and travelers who walk these sacred slopes. The first reports were subtle. A fissure here, a shifted lid there. Most dismissed them as natural erosion. After all, the mountain is old, its limestone vulnerable to stress and weather. But as more incidents surfaced, some showing burial chambers partially exposed, curiosity gave way to concern. Why are these ancient tombs moving now? Why in this generation, after lying undisturbed for centuries? Residents describe an uncanny atmosphere surrounding the newly opened sites. Some speak of hearing hollow echoes beneath their feet, Others recount seeing fine dust rising from cracks in the stone, as though something deep within the mountain is stirring. Not violently, not disruptively, but persistently, like a slow breath through the roots of history. Scientists point to geological explanations. The Mount of Olives sits on a fault line, susceptible to mild seismic shifts. Earthquakes have shaken Jerusalem in the past, sometimes weakening underground chambers. Yet, even these experts admit the timing and concentration of recent disturbances raise questions. Why so many in such a short period? Why on the oldest, deepest sections of the cemetery? Bible scholars, meanwhile, see something different. An echo, a pattern repeated across Scripture. They point to Matthew 27 to 52-53, where the earth quaked at the death of Christ, and the tombs broke open.